DiscerningHearts.com presents Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors. I'm your host, Kris McGregor, and I'm delighted to be joined by Father Robert Spitzer, who was the former president of Gonzaga University. He's the founder and president of the Magis Center, committed to the revitalization of transcendence and virtue through the close connection between science, reason, and faith. He's also the president of the Spitzer Center of Ethical Leadership. He's the author of 7 books, including Finding True Happiness, New Proofs for the Existence of God, Healing the Culture, 10 Universal Principles, and 5 Pillars of the Spiritual Life. With Father Robert Spitzer, we go inside the pages of The Soul's Upward Yearning, Clues to Our Transcendent Nature from Experience and Reason, published by Ignatius Press. Father Robert Spitzer uses physics, cosmology, psychology, neuroscience, NDE studies, and contemporary philosophy to reveal the truth of our spiritual nature in his book, The Soul's Upward Yearning. Since the 20th century, scientific materialism has so undermined our belief in the human capacity for transcendence that many people find it difficult to believe in God and the human soul. The materialist perspective has not only cast its spell on the natural sciences, psychology, philosophy, and literature, it also has enthralled popular culture, which offers very little to encourage the soul's upward yearning. Ironically, the evidence for transcendence is greater today than in any other period in history. In The Soul's Upward Yearning, Father Spitzer shows that we are transcendent beings with souls capable of surviving bodily death, that we are self-reflective beings, aware of and able to strive toward perfect truth, love, goodness, and beauty, and that we have the dignity of being created in the very image of God. If we underestimate these truths, we undervalue one another, underlive our lives, and underachieve our destiny. We now begin part 2 of our discussion with Father Robert Spitzer. What I love so much about it, Father Spitzer, is that experience, that identifying, acknowledging the sense of the sacred. And you help us to enter into that, in that interiority, in our heart, by not using, and I'm not discounting them by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the mystical doctors of the church, whether it's John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, you name them. But you use contemporaries who have been enlightened in particular fields that can help identify that interior heart experience in a way that head person, can I say, I mean, it's so convincing. It's remarkable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I first read the studies of Eliade, Mircea Eliade, the great historian, philosopher of religion, I mean, this guy, I mean, he was utterly comprehensive, right? He writes this, 8-volume encyclopedia of religion. I mean, you got to be a little obsessive if you're going to do that. But I mean, this is a true scholar, and I mean, he goes through and he finally says, what is it that's in every religion? And he goes through and he identifies all of these elements of religion. And what I find fascinating is it's there not because one culture borrowed it from another culture. All these cultures they have the same elements independently of one another. In other words, they independently derived the same sense of the sacred, the same sense of cult, the same sense of the holy, the same sense of worship, the same sense of a sacredness of place and sacredness of time, and the same sense of, a religious propriety, the same sense of a religious ritual. I mean, and you look at, even the rituals themselves, sacrifices, altars, completely independently of each other. All of these cultures are springing up all over the world doing the same thing. You gotta scratch your head and go, Why is it that human beings are universally doing this? And Eliade just gives you the answer. Because God basically is present to you, giving you this religious intuition, the sense of the sacred, which causes, of course, all of these desires within you to worship and so forth. And he, by the way, he connects himself very clearly with Rudolf Otto as well, the one who did the important work called The Idea of the Holy on the Numinous Experience. But these studies are important, and comprehensive studies are really important that include, all world religions. God doesn't leave anybody out. Basically, God's not going to condemn anybody because of an accident of birth, as our good, Vatican II documents say. God is going to, as Lumen Gentium says, God will save every human being through the saving activity of Jesus Christ, if they seek him with a sincere heart and try to follow him according to the dictates of their conscience. That's a quote right out of Lumen Gentium, which is the dogmatic constitution of the Church. We look at it, and of course God's going to give there's 7 characteristics of religions that are almost universal, which I outline in the book. And I just say, yes, of course, God is present. God is present to us in our souls, and of course he's calling us according to the dictates of our conscience. And in so doing, he's left a massive amount of evidence for us to look at about his presence to us in the interior.
The sheer joy of discovery, if this doesn't compel someone to pick up a copy of the book and just begin the adventure of that pondering and the encounter, and I don't want to bring up the negatives, but it does have incredible negatives to our culture because of this loss of the transcendence. If it isn't just for the joy of doing it, do it because our culture needs this. And you identified the 4 very real reasons why.
Yeah, first of all, that Candida Dervick study from the American Psychiatric Association ought to give everybody pause. Because, you do not want a whole culture moving to increase suicide rates, impulse aggressivity, and meaninglessness, despondency, substance abuse, and familial tensions. This would be a very bad cultural trend. But secondly, there's a really great study done by a guy named Parbatia and several authors on religious people and ethics. And what he shows at the end of this very comprehensive study is that religiously affiliated people are much more unlikely to do something unethical at the moment of decision. Now, you could say, well, what do you mean? Do you mean religious people know more about ethics than non-religious people? No, I'm not saying that, although they might. But what the study shows is that religious people are much more unwilling to be unethical at the moment of decision. They're going to act on their beliefs about right and wrong more than non-religious people are going to act. So we don't want cultures where we have a slip in the ethical trend, as it were, where we all of a sudden we give up religion, and of course that desire, to remain ethical at the moment of decision starts slipping as well. We don't want people having a lesser sense of themselves. In other words, just to treat themselves like a clump of atoms and molecules. Because if you do, that's the kind of materialism, right, that led fascists and communists both, right? Marx was he was a dialectical materialist. But at the end of the day, the communists and the fascists were both ultimately, materialistic in their view of the human being. So you're just a bunch of atoms, and molecules. You deserve the respect of atoms and molecules. And we all know what happens when totalitarian regimes get the sense that people are utterly expendable, merely material entities. They of course, do terribly, not only unethical, but just absolutely, tragic things. So at the end of the day, the cultural trends with the decline of religion, are, this kind of increased malaise in the culture, this increased sense of materialism and the tragedies that it produces, this increased sense of willingness to be unethical, and of course all of the other things of suicide rates and despondency and impulse aggressivity, etc. It's not a good sign for the culture, because we were meant to be religious, and we were called from the day our soul was infused in our body. At the very moment of conception, we were already being called by God to himself. And I believe that. I think a single-celled embryo has a soul sufficient to be called by God even then, in the most mysterious of ways. So, I have to say, we're making a big mistake with our materialism, and the only way is to counteract it is a contemporary Catholic narrative on transcendentalism, which is the opposite of materialism.
Yeah, I would also add into that very quickly, Father Spitzer, also the need for this, because it is an important source of healing and consolation for those who are suffering and who are sick. And particularly, I would, if you don't mind me saying, that in Western Europe and in America, at least, where we have this overwhelming, because of this loss of transcendence, we seek out everything we possibly can so we do not suffer, or we don't. Of course, no one wants to suffer, and of course, we don't want to be sick, but we've lost a sense of the value that can bring to our culture. Am I making sense with that, Father Spitzer?
Absolutely. In fact, I wrote a whole book on it. It's the fourth book in the quartet. So the Souls Upward Yearning is the second book in the quartet. Finding True Happiness was the first book. The third book is going to be on Jesus. The reasons for believing on Jesus is called God So Loved the World, Clues to Our Transcendent Destiny from the Revelation of Jesus, and that's coming out in February. Then somewhere around probably August-ish, right in that area, there's another book called The Light Shines On in the Darkness, Contending with Suffering Through Faith. And boy, Kris, I'm telling you, that whole book is devoted not only to showing why what you're saying is correct, but showing people how to suffer well through their faith, because that's precisely what needs to be restored. And if we don't restore it, at the end of the day, I think we're going to have much more tragedy in the culture. The malaise and the despondency that I was talking about, that's going to, if we lose not only a sense of our transcendence and a sense of God's presence to us in prayer and a sense of the meaningfulness of our suffering in light of our eternal life and in light of the unconditional love to which we're called, if we lose that sense altogether, then I think you're not just going to see suicide rates increasing along a rather steep slope. You're going to see it in almost a hyperbolic slope, and I think it's going to be a real tragedy for our culture. And right now, the Pew survey says with our young people, we're moving in atheism. We're not in atheism, but unbelief, which is nuns in their survey, NONES. The nuns, we're moving at an increase rate of 1% a year, so from about 24% to 36% a year. And so when you really think about it, we're becoming a culture of unbelievers, and I don't want to see what that culture looks like, but it won't be pretty. And all the newfangled computer games and all the new internet options, they're not going to make any difference, because we're going to be so spiritually sick, so transcendentally deprived. It really is going to be a culture of malaise. Look at Europe. It's already there. They're like 15 years ahead of us. Just look. And I mean, do we want to go there? I don't think we want to go there. I mean, I think right now we just have to get people re-inspired to learn about their transcendence. We have to be countercultural with our contemporary Catholic narrative on transcendence, and really insist in our high schools, in our college campus ministries, in our adult faith formation programs and so forth. We really have to insist that people start looking at the fundamentals of our transcendental nature once again. Because if the Catholic Church and if other churches do not do this on a scientific basis and on a logical and reasonable, experiential, well-studied sociological basis, then I think we're just going to lose the battle. We have to use the tools that the contemporary culture thinks are really valuable. And by the way, those tools point to transcendence more than any other era. That's the irony. We have more evidence today for transcendence than ever before, and here we are losing our sense of transcendence. It is the biggest mismatch I can possibly imagine. So that's anyway. I don't want to, I always have hope, and I know that God will lead us through this. My gosh, He's led us through much tougher periods in world history. I mean, not the least of which is horrible wars and so forth. But I still think we need to do something. And so at the end of the book on suffering, chapter 10, there's a whole philosophy of culture. And what does the culture have to do to respond to this? And what part does the church have to play in making the culture to be what I would call level 3 and level 4 culture instead of a level 1 and level 2 culture? We've got a long ways to go. We do a lot of things right. We do retreats right. We do spiritual encounters right. We have the Pope is just, man, he's speaking to the heart right. I mean, there's so many good things going on, but we better get the scientific basis and the empirical basis for transcendence. We need to get that right out in front of people, unabashedly, unashamedly, with words like transcendental. We got to get it out there so that, honestly, people can go, whoa, there is a reason for, belief. Anyway.
Well, there is, amen to that, Father Spitzer, because the thing is, you spoke about wars, and yes, we've gone through the last several centuries of some horrific battles, horrific wars against humanity, and yet this is the greatest war, isn't it? If we lose our sense of our souls, then what do we have left?
Well, it is so interesting, that it's going to be the silent war. In other words, the devil wins by literally the soft sell. And of course, the soft sell is the soft sell about us. I mean, if I were the devil, what would I do? I would deconstruct God. Then after I deconstructed God, I would deconstruct happiness. Right. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, the first thing I do is deconstruct God and transcendence. So I deconstruct your soul and God. I'd turn you into a materialist. Then I would deconstruct happiness, and I'd make you think that real happiness is materialistic and ego-comparative happiness rather than contributive, and transcendent happiness. Then once I deconstruct happiness, I can deconstruct freedom. Then I can turn freedom into freedom from instead of freedom for. Then I can deconstruct love. I can turn love into just love me, and so forth and so on, and instead of love others. And then once I've got those things deconstruct, I can deconstruct everything, right? I can deconstruct virtue. I can deconstruct personhood. I can deconstruct the common good. I can actually turn the entire culture right upside down on its head, lose every bit of its civility since the time of Plato and Aristotle, all of the increased civility from Jesus Christ and the revelation of God. I can just turn it upside down on its head and give them in all of the place of wisdom and beauty and goodness and love and transcendence and their eternal dignity and destiny. I can give them computer games. Wow, what a trade-off. And we're basically doing it. And I'm just scratching my head going, why? Are these computers? Is the internet? Is it that transfixing? I mean, I know there's a problem with pornography. I know there's a problem with, the image-based data. I know there's a problem with level 1, things, and how intense these things can be. But nevertheless, do we really want to give up everything for that? And people aren't asking that question. And what I'm trying to do is, through the Maja Center, is not just, write books on, the Souls Upward Yearning. I'm trying to give free videos, little 3-minute videos that I can, send out and try and hopefully make go viral and so forth, trying to get some stuff going that I think will maybe entertain the kids. Computer games that'll show them, hey, if you change the constants of the universe, you can watch the universe disappear, watch the universe burn, watch the universe get crunched, and so forth and so on. Something that'll get their attention so that they will finally ask this question: what is the meaning of life? What is the real meaning of happiness? 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? What's going to be the deal for me? And so if they could just start saying, do I want to give up everything just to sit there on my computer all day? Do I really want to give up everything to live a life of complete materialistic hedonism? Do I really want to give up everything for the pleasure principle writ large? Do I really want to give up everything for just one more notch of ego comparative superiority? Really, really, do I want to? And I'm hoping they're going to say, gee, I think I'm worth more than that. I think I've been called to more than that. I think I've been called to an eternal dignity and destiny with God and a transcendental vision and glory. I think there's something in me that's just quaking and telling me I'm more. The great poet John Donne, right? Mm-hmm. Batter my heart, 3-person God. In other words, just tell me who I am. And show me the redemption, that you're going to bring about, and of course we deeply know these things. Yet at the same time, if we don't ask the question, if we just sit there at the computer, wide-eyed, doe-eyed, pie-eyed, sitting there at the computer, just being entertained, we come so dangerously close to wasting our lives tragically. And that's why the book's there, but that's also the website, majacenter.com, if I might shamelessly say it. That's why we basically put it out, because we want any means possible, high school, college courses, adult formation, free videos, 3-minute clips on the internet, anything, to get people to ask the question about their transcendence and their true dignity and destiny.
Well, Father Spitzer, the work that you do, I have to say on a personal note, you are my absolute favorite author. I just absolutely cannot read you enough. And the Souls Upward Yearning is the one I'm walking around, and it's getting all beat up already, because I just keep going back and pondering and reflecting. But you're also one of the dearest pastors I believe that we have in the church today. You are truly a shepherd who is helping us to be that lumen gentium, to be that light of Christ, so that our souls, and it's through our souls that it happens, doesn't it, Father Spitzer?
It's very true. If you didn't have a soul, you wouldn't be drawn there. No child would be drawn there. No innocent would be drawn there. I just love hanging around a L'Arche community. Here are some people who've got some real challenges in their lives, and yet their sense of God and transcendence is aglow in their eyes. It's as if, okay, there might be some verbal and, memory, production problems, but I'll tell you something. Those kids know God, and they know love, and they know authentic love in God, and they just, they get it. And I just love hanging around them, because it's almost like this testimony that they not only have this soul, but they have this soul which has such transparency in their innocence, and their God is just communicating away, just manifesting love for everybody to see who wants to see.
Beautiful. I wish we had more time, Father Spitzer. Any final thoughts?
Oh, I just say, if people in your audience are teachers, I'm begging you to get this book and present even little snippets of it to your classes, or, just take our video series. It's co-published with Ignatius Press called, Happiness the series. It's what's called Happiness, the series, and it's got all this evidence for transcendence in it, near-death experiences, the 4 levels of happiness. I'm begging you, just give our kids a fighting chance to see what reason and experience can do, to really, show them their true selves. So if you're in the high school business, or you're in the adult faith formation business, I'd ask you just take a look at some of these videos, some of these workbooks, or even the Souls Upward Yearning and Finding True Happiness, and see if there's some possibility of getting it right to the heart of the kids. And we're looking for endowments really to underwrite these things, and every high school, so that every high school will be able to afford it. So thanks, Kris, for letting me give me not only the soapbox, but the
I love it, Father Spitzer, anytime. And I encourage people, for all God's kids, not only those that are in high school, but as you pointed out, those in adult faith formation, RCIA programs, study groups. I mean, this is, I don't want to say it's a higher level of apologetic. It's actually a deeper, more penetrating apologetic, that this really has the potential to change, not just and bring people to the faith, but help them to be steeped in it.
Yeah. Well, that's the true purpose of the book. Very honestly, I think you really,
I love
once
it.
again, you probed it, you found it.
I do, I love it. Father Spitzer, God bless you, and thank you so very much.
God bless you too, Kris, and God bless you.
With Father Robert Spitzer, we've gone inside the pages of The Soul's Upward Yearning, Clues to Our Transcendent Nature from Experience and Reason. To learn more about this book or to obtain a copy, go to Ignatius.com, the website for its publisher, Ignatius Press, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and or to download this discussion along with many others, go to DiscerningHearts.com. This has been a production of DiscerningHearts.com. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Join me next time for Inside the Pages, Insights from today's most compelling authors. With Father Robert Spitzer, we've gone inside the pages of The Soul's Upward Yearning, Clues to Our Transcendent Nature from Experience and Reason. To learn more about this book or to obtain a copy, go to Ignatius.com, the website for its publisher, Ignatius Press, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and or to download this discussion along with many others, go to DiscerningHearts.com. This has been a production of DiscerningHearts.com. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Join me next time for Inside the Pages, Insights from today's most compelling authors.